A survey undertaken by Personnel Today last year showed that 50% of those they surveyed had experienced imposter syndrome at one point in their life. And of that 50%, 72% had felt that it impacted their lives. Interestingly, if you dissect that a little bit further, 68% of those were Gen Zs, 58% of those were millennials. And it's no surprise that the Gen Zs and the millennials are struggling a little bit with their anxiety if they are feeling imposter syndrome at that kind of level. So if this is you, you aren't alone. In this week's episode, I want to discuss with you imposter syndrome and how to combat it and how to work against it so that you can create that successful career for yourself. Because one of the areas that imposter syndrome hits is your self-belief, the belief in who you are, that fundamental core of who am I? What can I bring to the table? So the first thing I'd invite you to do is to undertake the free Career Discovery Archetype quiz. This is a really good tool for just being able to understand where you fit and how you fit in to certain areas, because it gives you that little foundation of where you can go from there. So what exactly is imposter syndrome? How does it affect you? And how is it impacting your daily life? Well, imposter syndrome is that feeling of not being good enough, of not feeling like you are able to do something. You've probably got the skills, but you just don't feel like you're good enough. You could be looking at colleagues, family, people that appear to be so successful. How on earth do you live up to that? And I'm sure that you've gone for that promotion or that new job and you've just felt like, I'm just not good enough. Because I know I have. Way back in the early part of my career, I started a new role, and within 6 months, I was called into the director's office and he asked me to apply for the team leader role. And at the time, I felt so overwhelmed that he'd singled me out and asked me to come in, attend that interview and step up to manage a team that I'd only been with 6 months. Yeah, I managed my first team at 24. And at this point, I was in my early 30s. So I was more than capable of leading a team. But I'd only been with the company for 6 months, and that caused my imposter syndrome to kick in. So by the time I got to the interview, I didn't feel like I was good enough to lead that team. And the result of that was that I was passed over by a colleague that had been in that role for over 2 years, and he knew the contract inside out and back to front. And in fact, the feedback I got from that interview was that they knew I could lead, but I didn't have the confidence on the contract. Worse than that was that my colleague stepped into the leadership role and his role became available. So they sidestepped me to look after his role because it was quite a senior role within the company. I didn't get a salary increase. He did, but I didn't. But what happened was because of my natural leadership skills, the team came to me. They came to me for any decision making. They came to me for anything they needed help with. And then I would feed it back to him. For 2 years, that scenario went on because I didn't feel good enough. And yet clearly I was good enough because I was doing the job and I did it for 2 years. But because of my imposter syndrome and because of that, it held me back. And that's why I know the impact of it on your career. And it is that lack of belief that really holds you back. And we give off certain vibrations in the world, and what you put out in the universe tends to come back at you. So if I'm putting out an energy of I'm not good enough, well, I'm not good enough. How can you change your reality? One of the things I ask my clients to do is to have a deep dive and look at themselves. Start working through an exercise that I work with my clients on. I ask them to look at their skills, their awards, their recognition, and start to compile a document. You might just be leaving school. And I know that when I was leaving school, that big, you haven't got experience kept coming up in interviews over and over and over again. But how are you meant to get experience when you haven't got experience? Well, actually, you probably have. You do things outside school that potentially bring in skills. You have experiences that you're able to bring in. You have your education. It's a really strong foundational skill. I had a skill that I was very technical savvy. Technology was just being birthed when I was younger, but I had a real ability to be able to understand technology and to utilize it. So that was a skill that I had and I was able to bring through. I've worked with a young lad recently who just left college. The careers advisor had written him a CV, and that was great, but he was popping it out there and just not getting any results whatsoever. And when I looked at that CV, it didn't highlight any skills that he was actually bringing. It didn't highlight who he was. He'd actually been working from the age of 14 right up to present day, and he was 19 now. He'd had a Saturday job and a holiday job, and he'd had 4 different companies that he'd worked in and 4 different experiences that he could pull on. So we reworked his CV based on those skills and those abilities, that knowledge, then that experience that he brought in. We looked at each one of those roles and what had he done, what had set him apart in that role. And that is we worked on together. And the result of that was that within 3 weeks, he'd had 4 interviews, and out of those 4, he'd been offered 2 jobs because he was able to really bring some skills to the table and identify with what the employers were looking for. So start with a document, list those skills, those experiences, and you might be saying to me, yeah, that's fine, Penelope, but I don't have a Saturday job, or I don't have this. Have you been head girl? Have you been head of your sports team? Have you been something outside where go and ask your friends, your family, your colleagues, what do they say about you? What do they say that you bring to the table? I'm sure that when you start to ask them, you will start to get feedback on who you actually are. And then when you have it written down and you've got it written down in a document, who says that you can't do that? Look at those skills that you've got. Look at that experience that you've got. Look at those awards, those recognitions, what people say about you. Wow. Where's that imposter syndrome now? Because now you've got the confidence. And then it doesn't matter what is on the outside. So for my example, my leadership skills were strong. My knowledge wasn't. I can learn knowledge much the same as you can. So if I can go out there and articulate that I was the best leader possible and that I would learn the contract, I will probably have secured that role and had the salary to go with it for 2 years because I'd have had the confidence to say, you know what, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because this is who I am. So why not try it today? Why not start by taking the career archetype quiz, working out where you kind of fit, then looking at your skills, your experience, your recognition, and what your family and friends say about you. By looking at those achievements, however big or small, along with that personal feedback and having that in a document will really set you up for success. I'd love to know if you've faced this, what's worked for you, areas that you need help on. I will always give advice. If you're struggling with anything, pop it in the comments. And as always, I'd really love you to like and subscribe to this video and share it. Is there anybody else that you are knowing that is struggling with your imposter syndrome? Share this video. Let's make a difference on our careers. Let's make that confidence really shine through so that you can be who you say you are.